In Quentin Tarantino's 2009 historical revenge fantasy Inglourious Basterds, US Army Lieutenant Aldo Raine, played by Brad Pitt, recruits the titular Bastards, a squad of Jewish soldiers to wreak havoc behind Nazi lines during World War II. In the process, they cross paths with a parallel British mission and a revenge plot by a French Jewish woman, and succeeded in gunning down Adolf Hitler and most of the Nazi high command in a burning French theatre. Ridiculous Hollywood nonsense, right? Well, not as much as you might think, for not only did Allied intelligence actually concoct a plan dubbed Operation Foxley to assassinate Hitler, but they also recruited a large number of Jewish refugees to conduct secret operations behind enemy lines. And by far the most successful of these, carried out in the dying days of the war, succeeded in saving thousands of lives and a key Austrian city from unnecessary destruction. This is the story of Operation Greenup, the real-life Inglourious Basterds.
Just before we get back to Simon diving into today's video, I've got something super important to chat about: your online privacy. In particular, data brokers that collect and sell your personal information. But fear not, my friends, because the sponsor of today's video, Delete Me, has your back. Delete Me is a hands-free subscription service that will help remove your personal information that's being sold online. Sign up is quick and easy, and from there, their system and team of privacy experts scour the web looking for anywhere your personal information is available from hundreds of data broker sites. Once they've done that, they then give you a report showing exactly where your data has been found and removed. From there, they continuously monitor various outlets and repeat removal as needed to make sure your data isn't ever getting repopulated. Beyond all this, they also have privacy advisors at your disposal if you need to make any custom requests or have any concerns about anything you see in your report, with your first report coming 7 days after you sign up. As someone who's worked online for a couple decades now, from long before YouTube was ever a thing, and values his and his family's privacy to a pretty extreme degree, Delete Me is a service I've been using and loving for helping to keep my personal information private. If you similarly value your privacy and you'd like some help protecting your personal data, signing up is a breeze. Just head over to joindeleteme.com/TIFO and use the promo code TIFO to get 20% off all US consumer plans with our exclusive promo code. Gets you a discount on a valuable service and helps support our work, so everybody wins. Thank you to Delete Me for sponsoring this video and supporting our work here as well. Now back to Simon for today's video.
The real-life bastards in this story comprised three men. The first was Friedrich Meyer, born on October 28, 1921 in Freiburg im Breisgau in Germany to Berthilde Dreyfus and Heinrich Meyer. Heinrich served in the Imperial German Army during the First World War, receiving the Iron Cross Second Class for gallantry during the 1916 Battle of Verdun. When the Nazi Party came to power in 1933, the family hoped that their patriarch's wartime service would shield them from anti-Semitic prosecution, but they were bitterly disappointed. The younger Meyer, who was employed as a mechanic for the Ford Motor Company, often had to fight off anti-Semitic street gangs on his way to and from work. By 1938, it became clear that Germany was no place for Jews, so Meyer and his wife emigrated to the United States, settling in Brooklyn. They soon discovered that anti-Semitism was nearly as rife in America as it was in Germany, though Meyer was not one to let this slide. On one occasion, he responded to an employer's anti-Semitic joke by punching him out cold. Following Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, Meyer enlisted in the US Army, where he quickly displayed a winning combination of daring, initiative, and lateral thinking. During one training exercise in Arizona, he snuck behind enemy lines and captured a number of officers, including a brigadier general who protested, "You can't do that, you're breaking the rules." To which Meyer responded, "War is not fair. The rules of war are to win." At this, the general admitted defeat and raised his hands in surrender, like a boss. These qualities, as well as Meyer's fluency in German, French, and Spanish, brought Meyer to the attention of the Office of Strategic Services, or OSS, the precursor to today's CIA, who immediately recruited him as an agent and trained him in demolition, marksmanship, and hand-to-hand combat. In a 2013 documentary, Meyer explained his motivations in a statement that wouldn't have sounded out of place in Tarantino's film. "It felt like I had my chance to do what I set out to do, kill Nazis. That's why all the Jewish boys joined." Whether his goal included collecting 100 Nazi scalps is not recorded. The second key figure in Operation Greenup was Hans Winberg, a Dutch Jew born on November 29, 1922 in Amsterdam. On the eve of the Second World War in 1939, Winberg's parents sent him and his twin brother Louis to live with his father's business partner in Brooklyn. In 1943, 4 years into the Nazi occupation of the Netherlands, Winberg's parents were rounded up and deported to the Auschwitz extermination camp. Distraught and vowing revenge, the now 21-year-old Winberg enlisted in the US Army. He was soon approached by an OSS recruiter who had sought him out for his fluency in German, Dutch, and English. Winberg volunteered on the spot and was trained as a radio operator. The third and final member of the team was Franz Weber, born in 1920 in Oberpurfus near Innsbruck, Austria. As an officer in the German Wehrmacht, he served on several fronts, including the savage anti-partisan campaigns in occupied Yugoslavia. An avowed and conscientious Catholic, Weber soon grew disgusted by the brutal reprisals inflicted against the local population and became convinced that the Nazi regime was evil and unsustainable. After transferring to the Italian front in the summer of 1944, he defected to US forces near Viareggio. Recognizing his willingness to oppose the Nazis and his intimate knowledge of the Tyrol region, the OSS quickly recruited Weber and assigned him to the Operation Greenup team. Meyer, Winberg, and Weber's mission was, simply put, to determine how the war in Europe would end. For years, rumors abounded that the Nazi High Command was building an Alpfestung, or Alpine redoubt, a large, heavily fortified area in the Alps where the last fanatical Nazi holdouts would make their last stand, potentially extending the war by months and costing thousands more lives. Operation Greenup called for the trio to be parachuted into Tyrol near Innsbruck, where they would report on the movement of troops and equipment through the Brenner Pass between Austria and Italy, and determine whether the Alpenfundstang actually existed. Meanwhile, they would cause as much chaos as possible behind enemy lines. The OSS had already sent 30 teams into the area, but all had either been captured or failed to gather any useful intelligence. However, Operation Greenup had an ace up its sleeve, Franz Weber, who not only knew the area intimately, but whose family in Oberpurfus had bravely volunteered to shelter the agents and run messages for them. On February the 26th, 1945, the team made their jump over a frozen mountain lake 10,000 feet up in the air, the only viable drop zone in the area that wasn't crawling with German troops. While mercifully the lake was frozen solid and no one was injured or drowned, unfortunately all but one supply canister was lost, including the one holding the team's skis. They were thus forced to hike for miles through waist-deep snow until they reached Franz Weber's house. There, they set up camp and began preparing for their mission. Brooklynites through and through, the team created a system of code names to disguise their operations by laying a map of their home borough over a map of the Tyrol and renaming each location after its corresponding New York street or intersection. As soon as the team was organized, Meyer descended into Innsbruck and posed as a Wehrmacht officer, even sleeping for a while in the officers' barracks. There, he gathered a windfall of intelligence from his unsuspecting fellow officers and kept an eye on troop and supply movements throughout the city. He even organized an underground resistance movement among local army and Gestapo personnel who had grown disillusioned with the Nazis and wished to bring a swift end to the war. Franz Weber's sisters bravely volunteered as couriers, carrying information gathered by Meyer back to Winberg, who, using a radio hidden in the Weber's attic, transmitted it to the OSS listing post in Bari, Italy. The intelligence allowed the US Army Air Force to bomb dozens of trains, blocking the Brenner Pass for weeks on end and severely disrupting German supply lines. 3 weeks into the operation, Meyer learned of a secret underground munitions plant in the area and decided to pose as a French electrician fleeing the Russians in order to infiltrate it. Unfortunately, Meyer's luck suddenly took a turn for the worse when one of his local contacts, a black marketeer, was captured by the Gestapo and promptly routed out the rest of his resistance network. Meyer was immediately captured and brutally tortured, being stripped naked and thrashed with a bullwhip for hours. Still, he maintained his story, that is, until the informant was brought into the torture chamber. His cover blown, Meyer admitted that he was an American agent, but in a bid to save his team, maintained that he worked alone. At this point, Meyer should have been dragged outside and executed as a spy, but once again fate intervened. At the same time, the Gestapo was interrogating another American OSS agent, Herman Mattel, who they showed a picture of Meyer for identification. Thinking quickly, Mattel claimed that Meyer was a high-ranking intelligence officer and that American forces would execute anyone caught harming him. The ruse worked, and instead of being executed, Meyer was brought before the highest official in the area, Franz Hofer, the regional governor of Tyrol. Convinced that the Third Reich's defeat was inevitable and not wanting to be tried as a war criminal, Hofer treated Meyer humanely and allowed him to contact his OSS handlers via neutral Switzerland. The message they relayed was a masterclass in hard-boiled understatement reading, "Fred Meyer reports he is in Gestapo hands, but cabled, 'Don't worry about me, I'm not really bad off.'" With Hofer's help, Meyer organized the peaceful surrender of Innsbruck, preventing the city from unnecessary destruction. On the morning of May 3, 1945, as the US 103rd Infantry Division was preparing to advance on the city, Meyer drove out in a car, flying a white flag improvised from a bedsheet, and informed the American forces that the German garrison in Innsbruck was prepared to surrender without resistance. Though only a sergeant, Meyer claimed to be a lieutenant in the hopes that he would be taken more seriously by both German and American officers. It worked, and Innsbruck was captured without a shot being fired, and thus ended Operation Greenup. In addition to tying up German logistics, Greenup's greatest achievement was deflating the myth of the Alpenfestung once and for all. Although a plan for an Alpine redoubt had been seriously proposed and provisionally approved by both Adolf Hitler and Galatea Hofer, due to a lack of resources, no serious attempt was ever made to implement it. Nonetheless, in 1945, Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels created a special unit to spread false information about the hypothetical redoubt, going so far as to draft fake blueprints and troop movement orders and leak rumors to neutral countries. This deception operation was enormously successful, forcing the Allies to expend considerable resources trying to establish the scale and readiness of the Alpenfestung. It was not until Allied troops actually crossed into Austria that they finally learned that the dreaded Alpine redoubt was nothing but a mirage. After the war, Meyer moved back to Brooklyn, where he worked at a power plant until his retirement in 1977. He then moved to Charlestown, West Virginia, where he volunteered as a driver for Meals on Wheels for 38 years. In 2013, Senator J. Rockefeller presented Meyer with 10 decorations for his wartime service, including the Prisoner of War Medal, Good Conduct Medal, American Campaign Medal, European African Middle East Campaign Medal, with 3 Bronze Stars, World War II Victory Medal, World War II Honorable Service Lapel Button, and the Parachutist Badge. During the award ceremony, Rockefeller opined on Meyer's wartime contributions, stating, "Mr. Meyer is a remarkable but incredibly humble man whose bravery in World War II is only now getting the attention it deserves. I am truly honored to be here today and to share his story." Frederick Meyer died on April 15, 2016 at the age of 94. Hans Winberg, Operation Greenup's radio operator, left the army in 1946 and studied chemistry, obtaining his bachelor's degree from Cornell in 1949 and his PhD from the University of Wisconsin in 1952. He served on the faculties of the University of Minnesota, Grinnell University, the University of Tulane, the University of Leiden, and the Rijksuniversiteit Groningen before retiring and founding a successful chemical company. He died in 2011 at the age of 89. Finally, Franz Weber remained in his hometown of Innsbruck, where he became chief of police. He later headed the Tyrol Farmers Union before going into politics and serving in both the Tyrolean and national Austrian legislatures. He died in 2001 at the age of 81. While Operation Greenup was the most successful operation of the war conducted by Jewish operatives, it was far from the only one. At the outbreak of war, Jews who had fled Germany and occupied Czechoslovakia for Britain and her colonies were rounded up and interred as enemy aliens. In 1942, however, Prime Minister Winston Churchill, desperate for any means of striking back against the Germans, approved the formation of a special commando unit codenamed No. 3 Troop or X Troop, whose members were to be recruited from among the interned Jewish refugees. Numbering some 130 men and commanded by Captain Brian Hilton Jones, X Troop participated in a number of daring operations. For example, during the disastrous Dieppe raid on August 19, 1942, 5 members of the unit, all former Sudeten Germans from Czechoslovakia, infiltrated a German headquarters to capture an Enigma cipher machine. Later, in the lead-up to Operation Overlord landings in Normandy, X Troop operatives and German-born Jew Stefan Rosenberg, codenamed Stefan Rigby or Nimrod, took part in the vast deception operation designed to convince the Germans that the invasion would take place in the Pas-de-Calais region. And to learn more about this, please do check out our previous video, The Bizarre Story of the Massive Fake Army That Defeated the Nazis and Helped End World War II. Rosenberg's mission involved sneaking behind enemy lines, disguised as a German intelligence officer, disguised as a member of the French resistance, and take that, Robert Downey Jr., briefing his superiors on the alleged Allied invasion plans. In the end, he succeeded in securing an audience not only with Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, commander of German defences in Normandy, but Adolf Hitler himself before escaping back to British lines. How Rosenberg restrained himself from killing the hated Führer then and there remains a mystery for the ages. Over the course of the war, X Troop lost 21 men, killed and 22 wounded, but that, dear viewers, is a story for another day.